Hi, welcome back to another video. And today I will once again be talking about the 2025 New York City mayor election that is coming up this November. Now, if you've watched this channel a lot, you know I've talked very frequently about this mayor election, not just because I'm a New Yorker, but because this mayor election is one of the few mayor elections that will be happening this November, and along with one of the few elections that will be taking place this year. And it is very important to watch. You know, the mayor of New York City has a very popular it gains a lot of attention throughout, and not just the people in New York, but overall in general. There's a lot of presidents that get their attention and stuff like that. And this mayor election is going to be very interesting because something very unusual is going to be happening in this election, where when New Yorkers go to the ballot box in November, they are going to have three or possibly four candidates to choose from. As you can see, here's Eric Adams, formerly a Democrat, now an independent, who dropped out of the Democratic primary after he was not satisfied at all with how bad his poll numbers were in the primary. So dropping out of the primary was able to let him continue on campaigning despite how unpopular he is. And he is very unlikely to win, especially with how unpopular he is within New York City, and not just Democrats. Almost all of New York City. He has a 16% approval rating, and it is not looking good for Eric Adams. Now, the Democratic nominee has yet to be chosen, and that is most likely what we're going to be talking about today. However, the Republican nominee will once again be Curtis Sliwa, who, if you remember, in 2021 lost to Eric Adams in 2021 by a big margin, because it is very, very hard to win as a Republican in New York City. New York City is a Democratic stronghold. It is very liberal. There are a lot of boomer Democrats, and it is very, very unlikely to win down there as a Republican. So I do not expect at all Curtis Sliwa to win this election in November, and it's going to be very hard now that we also have Eric Adams as an independent candidate. We're going to have a Democratic candidate, and we also have this other independent candidate who also won't win, but he's going to drag on more to the vote. So it's going to be even more hard for Curtis to win this time than 4 years ago. 4 years ago, he had much better shot because you didn't have all these candidates that are going to be drawing up the vote. Now, Eric Adams, right, he's not going to win. But it's going to be very interesting to see how many votes he gets. He's very unpopular within Democrats, especially also Republicans. And ever since he really got that image with, when he was talking on with Fox News, when he was making deals with Donald Trump, he was not just disliked within the Democratic Party, but anyone who has disapproved within what the ICE agents have been doing, and along the agenda and the narrative that has been attempted to be pushed by the White House. So Eric Adams is very, very unpopular within New York City. Now, the Democratic nominee is going to be very interesting because it is coming down to two people, right? For the longest time, ever since Andrew Cuomo entered this race, right? Andrew Cuomo entered this race on March 1st, 2025. I made a video about it a month ago, actually 3 months ago now. But still, right? Cuomo's been in this race now for 3 months, which is much less than his opponents, like Brad Lander, July of 24. Zohran's been in since October of 2024. So these candidates have been in this race much longer than Cuomo. But despite that, Cuomo has a very good polling lead, or has had a very good polling lead. But in recent weeks here, you have really seen it declined. Look at this in in January, right? Before Cuomo, even entered the race, he was at 43%. Zohran was at 2. All these other candidates weren't even close to Cuomo, and he kind of just zigzagged for a while. And then, right, Cuomo enters this race. He goes from 36 to 48%. He gets a big boost here, but then so does Zohran, right? Zohran goes from 4% to 21%. Zohran has been viewed, Mandani, by the way, that's who Zohran is. Zohran has been viewed as this really anti-Cuomo, anti-establishment, progressive, far-left, socialist candidate who really has been surging in recent weeks here. And not just he's been surging, but Cuomo polling lead has absolutely collapsed here. We've gone from Cuomo being at his peak to 53% back in early of last month here. Cuomo was at 53%, Zohran was at 25%, and now he went from 53 down to 44. down to 35. Zoran went down a little bit to 23. He hasn't moved much, but still, Cuomo's polling lead has absolutely collapsed within these these recent weeks and these recent months here, because how competitive this race is going to get. And what's important to notice or to remember here is that this primary election, right, despite what this rate shows polling shows, is going to be on certain rounds here. And now this is some Emerson polling that were released um just a couple days ago here at the end of May here. These are all the 10 rounds. No, obviously there's going to be a lot of candidate eliminations, but we have a lot of candidates within this Democratic primary. Obviously, everybody knows that Cuomo's been leading this field even before, since he got into the race. But now that Cuomo's polling lead is starting to collapse here, the question is if Zoran here really can not just make this competitive, but can actually win against Cuomo and become the Democratic nominee to face Eric Adams and Curtis Silva in November. And if he is able to do that, that would be quite a turnaround. And that would be quite a humiliation for Cuomo, who is attempting to make this political comeback. He has a pretty good chance of doing so. But if he loses to Zoran, that's pretty much it for him. It's over. If Cuomo or Zoran win the Democratic primary, they win the general election, because the Republicans or independents can't win in New York City. It's very liberal. It's a Democratic stronghold. It's helped multiple presidential candidates, including Kamala Harris herself, win the state of New York. But anyways, so these are the rounds of these Democratic candidates here. We have, right, Andrew Cuomo, Ramadani, Lander, Stringer, Eric Adams. Well, this isn't the Democratic primary. This is just this is the the candidates for the rank voting, right? There's going to be all these candidates. Anyway, so on the first round, right, Cuomo leads 35%, Zoran gets 22%. You have to get 50% here. Lander gets 10, 9, 8, right? All these other nobodies. And because Bartholomew, gets like single digits here or whatever, he's eliminated. Bartholomew is eliminated. And then we get down to the other candidates, right? Cuomo and Zoran, and Lander, they get the most. All these other candidates don't, and Tillerson gets eliminated. So on and so on happens to eventually you get to, the seventh round or the eighth, ninth, 10th round, where you have like the last 5 to 4 candidates here, right? Adams gets eliminated, Stringer gets eliminated, and then eventually Lander gets eliminated here. But you kind of see both Cuomo and Zoran's, lead here kind of increase here, where they really don't start to move until you get to the final, the final 3 to 4 here, where Cuomo's goes up to the 40s, Zoran's goes up to like the late 20s here, and eventually the early 30s, and the late 40s here. When you get down to the three, to the top 3, Lander gets 22, Zoran gets 31, Cuomo gets 46, and then finally, when it's a head-to-head to Cuomo and to Zoran, Cuomo gets that 54%, right? He wins, and Zoran gets that 45%, cutting him short of winning, this race. So if Zoran is able to even increase this 1-to-1 head, and there even was a poll here where Zoran was able to even shorten it, where apparently months ago, this head-to-head polling between Andrew Cuomo and Zoran was like 40 points, according to Zoran's campaign. They were 40 points apart, and now they're just 8. That is that is a crazy shift to in Zoran's favor, and it's not good numbers the Cuomo campaign wants to be seeing. And if you're saying, well, if that information is coming from the Zoran campaign, how can you believe that? How can you how can you be certain or sure? Well, my argument for that would be this, this polling lead we're seeing on Wikipedia here, where we're seeing Cuomo's, lead in the primary go from 53 to 35. And sure, Zoran's, polling lead really hasn't, really hasn't moved much at all. Highest he's getting is 25% compared to Cuomo's 53%, but now Cuomo's down to 35%. This is the lowest he's ever been. He hasn't been this low since February, before he even entered the race. And after he entered the race, it jumped. But now he's in the race, and he's back down to 35%, and Zoran's at 23%. That leaves Zoran just 12 points away from Andrew Cuomo. If this repeats for the next 2 weeks until the primary, Cuomo, and despite he already is, but he could be even more in serious trouble. If Zoran passes him in the polling, it's going to send alarm bells, right? Cuomo has the money, he has the endorsements, he is, he's been most likely to win this primary in the general election before he even jumped in the race or his name was even being considered. So if he loses, that would be the biggest political, embarrassment since I think Ron DeSantis's 2024 presidential campaign. So if Zoran is able to do this, if Zoran is able to win the Democratic nomination and then become New York City mayor, that would be a huge political upset, especially to the establishment. And I think it's going to be very interesting in these final 2 weeks of these campaigning for the Democratic primary, how it all goes down. Obviously, we're probably not going to get any debates here, but the Democratic primary and how this polling shifts for the next 2 weeks is going to be very interesting. Either Cuomo's going to go back up and he'll, be the winner, or he'll continue going down. It's either going to get more competitive or Zoran's momentum is going to keep going and he could become the Democratic nominee, which would be it would be completely unthinkable just months ago. It'd be absolutely okay. So there's, anyways, yeah, it would be unthinkable just months ago. Nobody thought that Zoran would be able to, be this high now, or Cuomo would be sinking this much. But anyways, we will see in these next 2 weeks how this polling goes, who's the nominee, and I'll be making more videos on it on whatever happens. But anyways, that is the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.